Hello, welcome back to the April Astro Weekly Update. We're from AsteriSofiaKairos. My name's Sonia from Celestial Astrology, and with me I've got my good friend Shawna from Smart Astro, and you can reach her at smartastro@gmail.com. We're going to be looking at the 2nd to the 9th of April, but we're also adding in a monthly overview for you because we're starting out the month. So I hope your month of March went okay. Well done for getting through it, because it was big, the month of March. So here is the overview for the whole of April. These are all the dates. We won't be looking at all of them. We're picking 3 from each week that we look at, which are the main 3 we think you need to know about in depth. But here are all the dates, so you might want to take a screenshot of that if you want to keep it and track the astrology through the months. We're going to look at an overview of the month, but I just want to mention that we've just had a lot happening in March. We had the eclipse season, we had Neptune went into Aries just right at the end. So there was a lot. And now we're going into April. It slows a little bit, but there's still a lot happening and it's tying up some of those loose ends. So just a little bit on reflection on how March was for you. But as we look now at April, the sun is in Aries. The sun moved into Aries, which started the spring equinox in March, and it will be moving into Taurus. So we've got a lot of concentration, even when we just look at this graph of the month from AsteriSofiaKairos.com, we can see a lot of focus in these signs, the mutable signs and the cardinal sign of Aries. So we know that the sun is moving from here to here. And I've marked up the mutable signs and the cardinal signs for you. The mutable signs are where Pisces is, where you see this cluster of planets. And the cardinal signs is where they're all headed into Aries. But if you've got planets or angles in Cancer, Libra, Capricorn, they'll be affected because they're either opposite or square to Aries, where it's moving. Or if you've got mutable signs, Pisces, Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, they're going to be where those planets are leaving now, finishing up business and heading towards Aries. So I hope that makes sense.
When we're talking about the moon's movement, obviously we get the entire zodiac with the moon, but we're going to have some heavier points when it comes to the new moon and the full moon. That full moon in Libra is going to be a little bit of a bigger deal. And I think as we're building into that and that moon travels through Virgo, it's going to activate some of that Pisces energy again, too, because of that axis. But yeah, watch for that full moon in Libra, which means we're also going to hit those touchy points when we get those quarter moons, too, in Cancer and Capricorn.
Yeah, we see Mercury's here finishing up its time in Pisces. It's retrograde still at the moment, but it will be turning direct and returning back to Aries during this month. So again, affecting both of these signs, mutable and the cardinal signs.
We've got Venus next, right?
Yeah, Venus.
So with Venus is currently retrograde and going to be moving back as we're recording this, I should say, and going to be moving back over its exaltation degree through the end of Pisces and making its way very slowly back into Aries. So we're going to have a very watery Venus moving into a very fiery Venus. It should be interesting.
Yeah, this is a story like this threshold, this cusp here that marks the beginning of the zodiac year, that these planets are like guarding, aren't they? That Neptune's traveled over. It's just become such a attention focus point. And we've got Mars now is continuing its journey on, and Mars is still in the shadow of its retrograde before as it returns through Cancer, where it is in full. So it's not particularly happy in this watery place, but it is trining all of these planets in Pisces. So people with water planets are also affected, water placements. So that's Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces. See this with this trine from Mars to these planets in Pisces. But Mars will be reaching Leo, which will be interesting once it gets to 6 degrees, which I don't think is until May, when it gets to 6 degrees and gets out of its shadow. But at least it's getting there on a part of its journey. And it isn't completely over its retrograde story until it actually reaches Virgo. So we've still got quite a ways to go before we can completely wrap up this long retrograde story, which began for Mars in Cancer.
Yeah, we still got to hold on to the shadow period just a little bit longer. Yeah, Jupiter still in exile in Gemini. That's okay. We're trudging along, desperately holding our breath until we reach Cancer, affecting all those mutable placements for sure. Jupiter's got some interesting things happening in Gemini, and it feels like a little bit of a train going uphill right now. So not a ton of movement there since Jupiter's one of our slower planets too. But we've got a pretty good square situation as it keeps moving over the next few months to that square to the pileup we've got in Pisces right now too.
Yeah, last month Krista talked about this as like a group going out on a group hike, and you've kind of got Mars leading the way there and Saturn bringing up the rear. So we've got Saturn in Pisces there, bringing up the rear still, trailing behind, watching out on, who's left behind. Are there any stragglers? Just keeping a watchful eye over the whole party, maybe carrying some of the heavy supplies. I don't know, just that vision. That. But yeah, Saturn too is headed towards Aries this year. So this is the story of this year is all of these planets crossing this boundary. And what does that mean for us? But before they do, they've all got to meet with this node, this north node, which amplifies things and is traveling in the opposite direction, bringing us these eclipses in Pisces and Virgo. So that's our overview of this month. And also Saturn, thinking about it, it rules that Pluto in Aquarius. So they've got no line of sight, but it does matter. And once Saturn shifts into Aries, it will have a sextile to Saturn. So we might well feel a shift in these Pluto matters, but Pluto, of course, moves very, very slow. So we won't see Pluto moving very much at all. And the fixed signs, well, we haven't mentioned them. They're not totally free. We've got Uranus here, and Uranus is making aspects to a lot of what's going on. Uranus is trining these planets, a whole sign trine to these planets in Pisces, but some of them are making like an exact aspect, and also to some of the moons. It won't see the eclipse in Aries that happened in March. It doesn't see the Libra eclipse either. It does have this sextile relationship to Mars, and then it will square Mars when it goes into Leo. So that the fixed signs do have something they want to say, and also the fixed fire trines with all this Aries activity. So we might say that there's an Aries triplicity of Aries, Leo, and Sagittarius that could be affected by all this Aries initiatory action. So if you've got planets maybe in fixed Leo, that could be affected, or fixed water of Scorpio, that could also be affected.
Yeah, the Uranus sextile to the Pisces pileup is definitely liable to shake some ground a little bit. And I was just thinking while you're chatting about that fixed quadrant happening, or the 4 fixed signs. Uranus is unexpected in one word, right? And the fixed signs are the antithesis of that. So that's likely to feel, if you've got a rising sign in one of those 4 fixed, that's likely to feel itchy. But it's the same itch you've been feeling for at least the last year. So hopefully nothing new, and maybe starting to feel some resolution, but it's not going to move too quickly yet.
Yeah. And that's the thing is that with these planets, it's like the whole transit of Uranus. For example, I'm a Taurus rising, so Uranus has been there for a few years for me. And I'm not feeling it all the time, but when Uranus is activated is when you do feel something going on, something needs to change. That it can bring insights, it can be an awakener, but yeah, certainly I've been watching out for all the times when Uranus is activated by the movements of planets that are faster. And certainly if they relate back to your own chart, then that's quite important. And yeah, fixed signs are just so resistant to change, and they will cling on to what they've got, very stubbornly. And that's true of Aquarius too, being fixed, with the Pluto moving through, they're bringing the change. I mean, the Pluto change is so slow, but, change it will. Maybe less seen with Pluto, whereas Uranus, it's going to be unexpected, but it can also be insights into what change is needed, like those whispers of something has to shift, something has to change, and it's listening into that and working with it and making the change before you're forced to. So here are the 3, I say 3, we've kind of got 4, but they're all happening around the same time and linked.
Really just bleed in together.
They do, and sometimes it's so hard to separate them out. And what I found interesting here is how Venus is making, we've got the 2 malefics trining each other, they're talking to each other, and that's always important, but they are in this trine aspect, which is of the nature of Venus. So again, Venus has got her say here, and in the sign of Venus is exaltation, in the sign of Jupiter's rulership. So they're in benefic signs, or Saturn is at least. And then we've got Mars trining Venus, again in a benefic aspect, but Mars is in a difficult position. Venus is retrograde. So they're both not in their healthiest positions, but they're coming together to try and create something, to try and bring harmony to something. So maybe it's an insight on what these retrogrades and the retrograde shadow of Mars has been about for us, but we'll look at the charts for that a little bit deeper. And then we've got Venus conjunct Saturn. And this is the second of three because Venus is retrograding back. So Venus met with Saturn in January. She's now retrograde back, and then they meet again when they're both direct. So this is like a building story. Usually there's just one conjunction, but this is one of three. But yeah, Venus is touching on both of these malefics this week, which might be tricky. Venus just really likes fun, laughter, good things, peace and harmony. So for her to be meeting with these malefics while she's in this delicate retrograde position could be tough for those significations for us, like those things that she represents for us of love and relationships and peace. And then finally, Mercury direct. We've been waiting for this. It's been bringing me tech problems. I think it has for Shawna as well. It took us a little while to get set up and started. So yeah, it won't be out of shadow for a while, but at least it's turning direct and it's heading back to Aries. And of course, the times are all in Universal Time. I'm based in the UK and I've based the charts on London. So just adjust for your own local time zone, plus or minus. So Shawna, what do you think about this week? What have you seen here?
So much water happening. This Mars trine Saturn, it's a trine from Pisces to Cancer. Well, I should say Saturn trine Mars, right? So Mars has that inferior position. And then Venus, the exalted ruler of Pisces, in Pisces. Mars will still be in Cancer during this as well. With Mercury being direct and still in Pisces, we're still floating in through a little bit of that shadow, and Mercury is in exile here as well. So we're not quite out of the woods as far as that goes, but I think things will probably start feeling a little more natural again. Yeah.
Okay, let's take a look at the charts. So we've got Saturn trining Mars, and as we've said, this is on the 5th of April, Saturday. That's at 3:08 a.m. in London. So we've got Mars at 24 degrees of Cancer, trining Saturn at 24:58 of Pisces. And I've spoken before about like the archetype of this as like focused, disciplined action, deliberate, determined energy output, hard work, persistence, like these two planets coming together, completing, like with Mars being action and Saturn being discipline. And the shadow can be oppressive work regimens and his inhibited and frustrated energies, and maybe feeling like a victim while acting as a perpetrator, the sort of poor me archetype of the person who's going around harming other people while thinking or feeling like a victim themselves. And also, like we spoke about, like ballet teachers or spiritual teachers using that carrot and stick approach of using more stick because of them being the malefics, as it just being you're learning something because Saturn wants to teach and Mars wants to take action and progress. But it's harsh, it's difficult because there is this challenging, sometimes inner self-material or memories of harsh treatment that can come up. So Saturn here has some bonification because Saturn's so close to Venus, and we know that Saturn will meet Venus this week. But she's retrograde, so she can't offer a lot of help, but she is in her exaltation. So there is sort of looking to the past here, I think. And we see that Saturn's in, Venus is bound, but in Saturn's decan. So it's in its own decan. That gives Saturn some dignity and some resources. It's kind of like Saturn's story that's being told here in this watery place. But neither of them are particularly comfortable in the watery place. So they're both struggling. And then Krista and I spoke quite a bit about the difference between the moon Mars. And I was saying I feel like the moon in Cancer, when it comes close to Mars, is kind of offering some support because the moon has dignity here, but obviously Mars is harming the moon. So how we experience that can be mixed because as individuals, the moon representing our body and our feelings, that can be quite challenging. And that can be sometimes those feelings that they're churning up, these two, Mars and Saturn, churning up these feelings can be difficult, but because it's in that trine, it is ultimately for our benefit. It's to bring peace. It's of the nature of Venus, but Venus is retrograde, so it feels like it's kind of healing the past in a way, like the moon kind of washing over. Sometimes the moon and water can represent memories and things that the water holds on to. So a way of maybe resolving past memories that we haven't been able to heal before, and being able to put them in the past before Venus goes direct and we move on to a new chapter. maybe when Venus meets Saturn and moves forward, maybe that's what we're looking to do. Cancer holds on to all of those, and in a safe, healthy container, but they're held in the body, like that thing of the body holding the score, and the body will show maybe through illness, or it can manifest in different ways when there's repressed memories and painful traumas that are held in. So sometimes we need to process them gently and carefully. So I've just got this feeling of these 3 planets coming together in this trine aspect, with Mars still in its shadow, the moon coming so close, and I see Pollux, the star, there. And that's part of Castor and Pollux, the 2 fighting twins. So there's sort of that scrappiness of wanting that fight, but who has the upper hand there? And as Shawna said, Mars is sort of in the inferior position. Saturn has the upper hand here from Pisces. But we also look to Jupiter, and that's in that square position. So that's not easy either. But Jupiter has sight of Pisces, but not of Mars. So Jupiter's in a position to help Saturn, but not in a position to help Mars. But Mars has the moon there, able to help, even if it's damaging, harming the moon as the moon gets closer. We also see Mercury retrograde and the North Node amplifying. And again, we spoke about this last month with the North Node, that Abby Mashar said that the North Node can be good with a good one and bad with a bad one. But Venus is closer, but moving away with her retrograde. But she is closer than Saturn, and she will meet with the North Node sooner. So Krista and I felt our delineation was that the North Node was in a better position to help. And the way that it was amplifying was in a more positive way, because it's in a benefic sign. It's got sight of Jupiter, but with both Venus and Mercury retrograde, that we're kind of looking to the past. And also, we can't forget this sextile to Uranus that we spoke about, this fixed energy coming in. And it's fixed with a twist, of course, because Uranus is known as the Great Awakener, bringing disruptions and insights. So this trine is also activating Uranus right in the middle there, sextile to both planets, saying, hey, how about me? I've got insights to share with you both. And, if you don't want to hear my insights, I'm going to cause some disruption. I'm going to shake things up. I'm going to show you the way forward. So this could be a difficult time for the things that the malefic planets. And malefic doesn't necessarily mean evil. It just means the things that we don't like so much. Venus brings us all the nice, lovely things. And Jupiter, but, we don't always want too much of those nice, lovely things. We need to work hard to earn the lovely things in order to appreciate them, is the way I see it. So the best way in life is to have a balance of both. So we need those malefics. We need Mars to give us the energy and the passion to work hard. And we need Saturn to set those guardrails of how we're working hard. And then Venus to help us enjoy the rewards of how we've worked, what the work has brought us. And then Jupiter expands whatever it touches. So whether it's like difficult or good, it's going to show that up even greater for you. Kind of like the nodes in that way, that the nodes have been likened to Jupiter, in that it can be good or bad depending on what it's touching. So, for example, you don't want your waistline expanded. If you want to go on a diet, you want Jupiter to expand and help you support that, but you don't want it to support the overeating at Christmas time or something. So how do you see this, Shawna?
Yeah, so the Saturn trine to Mars, I mentioned before, it's very, very watery. Mars being kind of raw energy, is it being tempered by patience from Saturn? Could this look like strategy or, well thought out ideas taking form and actually being executed? That's what the Saturn to Mars looks like to me. The trine, like you said, trines are of the essence of Venus, so they're going to have some more ease to them, and hopefully a bit more flow. But with Venus being retrograde, I feel like you're dead on as far as maybe some healing, especially with that Moon Mars contact that's going to happen. If it's not just in the realm of memories, but perhaps maybe finding solutions to bodily issues. You kind of touched on that before too. I wonder if also, because Saturn and Mars are both malefics, but we've got this gentle aspect of the trine, that it's going to be, especially with Venus so close, kind of a bittersweet. So whenever I see Venus and Saturn together, that's kind of what I think. bitter being of Saturn and sweetness being of Venus, I feel like that just is a really easy signification for those two, and maybe with the Saturn trine to Mars, it could be more of like controlled aggression instead of reckless action, or, it could just point out things like a good time for athleticism or things where leadership really comes into high play. I know across the globe, we don't really talk about politics too much here, but tensions are very high. And I wonder if this maybe shows some ease and effect of longer lasting, I hope, with that Venusian influence, matriarchal visibility happening again here in the near future. I feel like with the two malefics, Saturn, Mars, that soft, gentle aspect of the trine, bittersweet is definitely the word that comes to mind for me.
Yeah, that's nice. Rather than list you out the dates, I thought this might be more helpful to show how you can go to AsteriSofiaKairos, and if you search under astrologer tools, there's this aspect search engine. And so I've put in Mars and Saturn and like any connections to see their cycles. So rather than, just read you out the list, I can show you. So in 2024, April the 10th, they were conjunct in Pisces at 14 degrees. So that was the beginning of this cycle. And this is the trine that we're looking at now in April the 5th, 2025, but it's the third of three trines. So we get to see that they've had these three trines from Cancer. One was retrograde. Mars was retrograde in February, and now this is the direct trine. So there's been these three times that this same story has been told. So it's kind of like this is our last chance to get this right. So maybe if things came up for you on any of these other three dates, so we're looking at September the 30th last year, February the 9th of this year, and then now what's coming up now. So if you notice a theme across those three dates, like this is that is repeated, then this is like the chance to really dig into that and not avoid those feelings or issues that are coming up. And then we can see how the cycle moves on. We move into the opposition, which will be in August. Then there's another trine, but it's the opposite way round. Saturn's retrograde then. Then there's a square sextile before their next conjunction, which will be next April in 2026. So it just helps show how the whole cycle progresses. But we see these three is like an unusual pattern right in the middle of that cycle, that normally there's just one. They started with a conjunction, one sextile, one square, and then suddenly those three trines. So it draws our attention as astrologers when we look for a pattern to see that, right, this is the last of this three. So what's been coming up over these 3 dates? And certainly if this impacts your chart, then maybe give it some deeper thought. Would you think that, Shawna?
I really love being able to access a list like this to really, especially the symbolism and the glyphs here. It really makes it pop. And so when dates and times can kind of get muddled in our minds, this actually gives you that tangible visual that you can go back and look at. And I'm looking at these dates and I'm going, I recognize some of these dates as having, they stand out just a little bit. It could be something as simple, Saturn and Mars, like authority and strategy, or, like careers that bring that in. Like, did you have a brush with law enforcement? Not necessarily in a bad way, but maybe it was even something benign as like a parking ticket or, something of that nature. Those are little whispers where those things could happen. Yeah. Interesting. I love that.
Yeah, it's helpful to see that. So do you want to take us away with Mars trine Venus?
Honestly, because they're so tight in there together, I feel like you did cover a lot too. They just bleed together for this week. Yeah, so now we've got the Venus trining Mars. We've talked a lot about, the chart in whole and these two signs in particular, but some of the other things when we get that exact aspect to Venus and Mars, we can think of things like, how do we find connection between desire from Venus and action from Mars? How do we blend attraction and drive that allows us to express ourselves in a natural way that doesn't maybe come off as aggressive as it might in normal circumstances or if we were to see an opposition between these two as opposed to the trine. With it being Pisces, are we adding in layers of reflection, especially with Venus being retrograde here and moving away from her exaltation? And do we see maybe issues of delayed gratification, or are we finding more structure around that too? Within relationships, are we reevaluating values? Or with Venus, are we also looking at different maybe creative pursuits? Are you finding new creative outlets that bring in action and drive from Mars and get softened and made more creative by Venus? I think we can look at things like, whenever we have a Venus retrograde, we always joke in astrology about, former loves, old flames popping up out of nowhere. Beware of, the text overnight or whatever the case is, that kind of thing. With Venus retrograde, we do see those things a lot, bringing past relationships back out. But it could also be like revisiting, a passion project, something that you used to devote a lot of time to in an artistic way, that you may be revisiting, or, oh, hey, I remember how I felt when I was doing this kind of thing, and finding a way to reintegrate that back into your everyday. How can you find a way to, revisit yourself even? Watch out for the old flames, for sure. They do pop up, and we still have a couple of weeks left of that Venus retrograde, I think, don't we? Let's see, when does she turn direct again?
Yeah, one more week.
One more week after this. Okay, so one more week. Is there a way as well that we can maybe find some more balance in how we assert ourselves, how we make ourselves more visible and more seen? Are we reevaluating how we present ourselves to the world? So do we need to find a way that's more forceful, but not overly, not any way that would overpower someone else? Yeah, I liked the phrase you used earlier, with a twist. That makes sense for the Venus-Mars contact as well. The quote unquote female and male energies, embodied of a chart. How can we find that synthesis between those two parts, those two energies? I feel like it can bring opportunities to rekindle past relationships, or at least reevaluate maybe where we took turns in certain things. It doesn't mean you need to rekindle anything, but we're sitting in Pisces, and that feels like a dream realm. And maybe it's a chance to reimagine how things might have been in order to say goodbye to something and to make peace with that.
Yeah, because sometimes we've told ourselves a story about it, and sometimes new facts may come up that we can reevaluate what the situation was, and that allows us to release it, but we always say, if an ex does come back in this time, just don't make any decisions during this time. Just wait and see, are they still around? Does it still look as good once Venus is direct and out of shadow? How do things look then?
Yeah.
Just stay in a holding pattern for now, and just bear in mind that this is coming up for a reason, but we don't know what that reason is quite right now. But
don't cut the bangs if you don't want to cut the bangs.
Yes.
Don't cut the bangs if you're not sure.
Yeah, we were talking about haircuts before we started recording.
Yeah.
At least hair grows back,
Hair grows back, yeah.
And especially with Venus and Mars symbolizing like the cutting, like the symbol can be the swords or the scissors. Venus being the hair,
the appearance, the look. Make the appointment for the hair salon, but make it for later in April.
Yeah, by all means, browse those styles and decide how you want to change things.
Sure.
Yeah, because certainly while they're still both retrograde or in shadow, they will trine again on the 22nd of May, but that's going to be a totally different energy, because Venus will be in Aries then. Mars will be in Leo. So they're both
fire.
Yeah, there's that fiery, like a cardinal to a fixed placement rather than a mutable to the cardinal. And Mars will have a different dignity because he'll be out of his fall, and Venus will be out of her exaltation. So they're kind of like a different placement as well, different status for both of them in this conversation that they're negotiating. So that will be different in May, but certainly check that, anything that you're looking at now, and see how it looks different in May.
Yeah, I'm giggling at this hair analogy actually, because I feel like if we cut the hair during the transits through water signs, we're going to be all in our feels about it and have a whole lot of regret. And if we wait until we get into the fire signs for this aspect, you'll feel more fierce.
Yeah.
Not a word I usually use, but you'll feel confident about it instead of sitting in regret.
Yeah. Yeah, you think of Venus and Aries as like the Boudica or the Celtic queens or the African queens that sort of vision her as like this warrior goddess going out.
Exactly.
Again, she's not particularly strong, but the sun's in exaltation there is like the leader, and she has to fight there. So it's like, what is she fighting for? And is she fighting for her hair? By all means. Because Samson had his hair cut off, and it was the source of his strength. So it's
Correct. Yes.
if your hair embodies your strength, and Joan of Arc had her hair cut to look like a boy, and again, it was meaningful and symbolic, wasn't it?
It really was.
So yeah, these women leaders have had their hair has mattered, and their hairstyle has said something about who they are as a leader. So yeah, maybe a lot of our women leaders don't want the soft feminine appearance. They want their hair to say something about who they are as a leader. So certainly in May, that's going to be the consideration. But in floaty Pisces, we've got a different vibe going on for Venus here.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've talked before about it being conjunct with the North Node and retrograde Mercury and the reviews that are going on. And yeah, we'll look at the next day rather than saying what's coming up. Are you ready to move on?
Yeah.
Right, so we've got Venus, Saturn, and I've been calling this my Jane Eyre. As we've moved through the whole of this cycle, that kind of connection came up for me, and I've used it in like the squares and the connections. Just that, and another archetype would be like Romeo and Juliet, star-crossed lovers. Venus bringing the love and the pleasure, and Saturn setting those limits and boundaries, and some strictness and discipline, and like space, like a lover holding you at a distance, maybe a cold lover who's maybe you can't quite work out exactly what the problem is, but something you can't get close to for some reason. So that was the feeling in Jane Eyre. For the whole of the book, she didn't know quite what the problem was. There was that mixed signals thing of he seemed interested, but she couldn't quite figure it out. And that's kind of what kept us reading to the end. That loneliness and the social responsibility as well, and the fear of reaching out that comes with this connection of these two. And again, I've got this list of dates because this is again a combination of dates for them. But when they meet, it can signal like a new start, a review and a renewal and a new start in their cycle. But obviously, because this isn't the first time that they're meeting, they're going to meet again. It's a return to what started when they first met. And Saturn can bring impermanence, loss, but also maturity. So if we think of relationships, it's a mature relationship. It's a sign of, are the relationships that we've started maturing, or are our relationships with our creativity maturing, or our art or how we express ourselves in this Piscean place of dreaminess, like even your meditation practice or your rituals, or any way that you engage your creativity and your love of anything, whether it's nature or art or music. If you're listening to music that you love, that's a way that you're expressing Venus in Pisces. Saturn's bringing something solid to that, kind of asking, what are you going to do with that? How is this going to go forward? What do you want to build with that? Saturn wants to build something, whether it's in Aquarius that he rules, where it's ideas that he creates that are for the good of humanity, or in Capricorn, he's building lasting structures. But Saturn is the Lord of time. So it's sort of a lengthy, mature process. Saturn is looking at these things that we love and asking, what are we going to do with that? And that's kind of what we're looking at. So here are the dates. And again, it's a longer, more string out cycle, but they first met in 2024, March the 21st, 2024, and that was at 12 degrees at Pisces. And then they went through the various aspects, the opposition in August, and then they had a conjunction in January the 19th, and now we're in April, and they're meeting again, and then they'll meet again on April the 25th. So there's these 3 meetings that are making, and we're only in the middle meeting. So maybe something started in your subconscious in terms of these kind of questions in January. But there's a review now. As Venus is retrograde, Venus is reviewing and looking again at what she brought to that first meeting and maybe changing her mind a bit on exactly what it was. Does something need to change about what you're building there, what structures you want to create, or what ideas you're bringing into the world? And again, we've got until April when they meet again to kind of firm up exactly what these two want to cook up for you. And that last meeting will also be in Pisces. So we've got this 3-point process going on with them as well. So this is why this is such an interesting time, this March, April, May time for these planets. There's so much that's being like renewed for us with these retrogrades, and because they're all in the same place, this Mercury and Venus, but also affecting, bringing in Saturn, bringing in Neptune, and this cusp of the Aries Pisces place. So much changing here. And then their next conjunction is March the 8th in 2026. So that's how long we've got to play out everything that they finally bring together in April the 25th. Then it will be adjusted as they move through that cycle of squares, trines, oppositions. They'll be adjusting and reviewing that, but the essential seed that's planted now and at the next meeting will be allowed to grow as they meet. And when we think of Saturn ruling Capricorn and Aquarius, it's opposite to the luminaries. So there's some tension with our direction, our environment, and our purpose in life. And Saturn's showing the obstacles and boundaries that we face with that. So Saturn's bringing that in with Venus and saying, like, how can we overcome all of that and create something for you when you get to Aries? It's a new meeting. And also in the same chart, going back, we have Mercury going direct. So we've got the Mercury station, and it's just a few hours after. So I've just put the one chart up because it's coming up at the same time. So we've got Venus having this kind of life review and this important cycle, but also Mercury going direct. Mercury retrogrades 3 times a year, and this year all the retrogrades have started in the fire signs. So we've got retrograde starting. He started this retrograde in Aries. The next one will be and there'll be one in Sagittarius. So the fire sign triplicity is up, but this time it's cardinal about what Mercury is initiating for us in terms of our thoughts and our ideas and how we communicate. And also he's the messenger planet. He rules business. So what are you doing in your work and commerce and money, the exchange of money? Are all like Mercury significations. But now he's gone into this place of Pisces where he's in fall and exile, as Shawna said, and things are harder for him there to kind of get those ideas across. So he's kind of leaning a bit, I think, on Saturn and the North Node to kind of bring that out for him. And we're reading a book at the moment, aren't we, on the nodes and how they churn things up. So things, if you think of the sea, how things can drift into the sand at the bottom of the sea, and then the nodes come and they just churn everything up, and everything's like floating higher to the surface and can be seen. Things that weren't seen before are suddenly visual. So there's a way that Mercury can now communicate that to us through our ideas, and maybe in Pisces through our dreams. So we've got this stellium in Pisces, just bringing through this Piscean. It can be spiritual, it can be about our rituals, it can be just about where we've got no boundaries, where things blend, get dissolved, or where we're confused and unsure and uncertain, where things are just hard to know where we actually stand. And with Mercury retrograde there, that's very hard to actually proceed with the administrative kind of tasks that we need to get on with to do our jobs. So I just say sometimes just don't fight it. If we haven't got the right camera or something, we can just wait. If you can, just wait. But with Mercury going direct, hopefully that will start easing up and we'll start getting an idea of what this retrograde has been about for us as well. And we see that it's square. It's got a whole sign square to Jupiter that it rules. So as Mercury starts to turn direct, that's going to help Jupiter in Gemini, because Jupiter in Gemini isn't feeling great. It's in exile, because it's opposite.
Yeah, exile, not.
Yeah, so Jupiter in Gemini is in exile, so it does struggle, but having sight of Mercury helps, but Mercury retrograde isn't able to help very much. So once Mercury's direct, and certainly once Mercury's out of shadow in Aries and has a sextile to Jupiter, we'll see some of these Jupiter in Gemini significations pick up. So watch out for data processing and the amount of information coming at us to start picking up and getting faster again. I think that Gemini area of the chart is going to start getting a lot busier once Mercury picks up speed. How do you see these? I know it's two, Saturn and Venus and Mercury.
Yeah, I agree. I think, you mentioned just waiting on some things if things aren't working out. You referenced, choosing the camera. We experience that ourselves today. But I think the thing that we have to remember about Mercury too is that it's the details and it's a process. And especially when we have it right there with Saturn, it's going to be methodical and calculated. It's going to be, do I need to just slow myself down so that I can see that next step? Doesn't mean you have to necessarily wait or put things on pause, but I think, Saturn's gonna grab hold of Mercury and say, hey, wait, hold on. Let's look at the plans here one more time, and then we'll take our next step, right? It's measure twice, cut once. And, while we're talking about that we got this beautiful little pileup of Venus, Saturn, and Mercury along with the North Node. We still have that trine in activation with Mars. It makes me think of like Amish furniture. You know what I mean? Like it's the thing that takes real effort and real energy, and it's things you don't necessarily want to do, but the finished product is just so beautiful and will last as long as you want it to. It's that beautiful piece that you can pass down from one generation to the next. Very heirloom like is the vibe that I get with this little pile up, especially with that trine to Mars.
That's really nice. I can see as well there's no line of sight from these planets in Pisces to the luminaries, to either the sun or the moon, but Jupiter can see them. So that Gemini area, still mutable, is getting the benefit of the luminaries, giving that support. I mean, the sun's in a direct sextile, as in the moon's moving into one, very, very close. So it's like, okay, all eyes on Jupiter right now. And Jupiter is, of course, ruling these planets. So that's not to be missed, I suppose.
It's a beautiful mutual reception right there. Mercury's in exile in fall, and so it could feel very hard to see the tiny details because Jupiter loves the big stuff. But there's a support and a respect between these two that I think will help them both, as long as they stay strategic about it, that they'll both be able to continue forward.
Yeah, because they've got that square, and that's of the nature of Mars, that's inviting action. It's asking them, what are you going to do?
So it won't be easy, but there will be work involved. But that's Saturn's there at the party. There's going to be work involved.
Yes.
You gotta, in order to make the furniture, you gotta go chop down the tree. There's work involved.
Yeah, but everything rewarding takes work. You don't appreciate things really that are just handed to you often. Anything that is really meaningful to us is something that we've worked for ourselves.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much. That was the week that was up to the 9th of April. And Shawna and I will be back with you on the 9th to the 16th of April next week, looking at the astrology for that week. I'm Sonia at AsteriSofiaKairos.com. Shawna you can write to her. You are taking bookings, aren't you, at the moment? You are doing readings by donation, is that?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. So Shawna's doing readings by donation, and you can write to her at smartastro@gmail.com to book in with her. And we're both founder members of AsteriSofiaKairos. So if you've enjoyed this content, please do like, subscribe, and comment and tell us how you're experiencing these transits. We love to hear your stories. So thank you so much for joining us.